Welcome to another edition of Expanding Mind. I'm your host, Eric Davis, continuing our conversations about the cultures of consciousness. It's 2019, so I've got a new vision. You know, things are going to change. Things are growing. Things are expanding. No, I've been doing this thing for so long that and a lot of the time I've actually avoided looking at numbers, and I have a long explanation for why that is, but let's just say that it keeps me more focused on quality than quantity. But that's only true to a certain degree. And recently I've been kind of looking at the podcast and thinking about how it might grow, how it might change. I'll probably be unrolling a Patreon later this year. It's a bit of a hamster wheel. I find I put even more time into it as it keeps going, even though I get more used to it. I want to, I'm spending money, reading books, time, better equipment. And also there's just that inevitable sense of wanting to get positive feedback that it makes it worthwhile. And along those lines, I did want to say that I was very pleased with one comment. I was kind of griping to a listener who I met many years ago on the playa, and he said something very sweet that I wanted to read. He says, "You hit this beautiful sweet spot of stoner, seeker, and intellect that is wildly underserved. It's the only thing that matters from what I can tell." And I love that spirit because I have been listening to a lot of podcasts that are kind of overlapping my zone, and nobody does what I do. I mean, one of the things is that if they're talking about weird occult stuff, they tend to kind of support the credulity of a lot of listeners. They want there to be a fantasy world where all these things are happening and magic is real and the aliens are communicating with us. And I'm fascinated in exploring those realms, and I have my own hunches, but I'm really devoted to this kind of middle way. And then on the other hand, you go to a lot of kind of philosophy, neuroscience, even Buddhist sites, and they're very rationalistic. They're very skeptical in the kind of new sense of the term, whereas I think of myself as an OG skeptic in the kind of Robert Anton Wilson Piro sense, where you're kind of radically open-minded, but also very respectful of critical thought and indeed of science. So this sort of middle path that I'm interested in most of the shows kind of inform. I mean, that we do other things too. There's not a lot out there. So if you like this show and, you listen to it regularly, please consider doing a review. Like iTunes is really a place to do it. We have reasonably good numbers, not a lot of reviews, and I'm not very high up on a lot of the lists. And it's fun to get good feedback. And another thing that you could consider is calling the PRN, which is the station that hosts the show, and doing a little voicemail that maybe we can weave into some of the shows, because it's really interesting for me to hear what people like about it. I have a wonderful folder in my email that's full of feedback. I probably have a couple thousand things from over the years, but a lot of things from the podcast. And it not just tickles my fancy, it's fuel in the tank, and it also gives me a sense of what are the things that people are most interested in, or what are the values that I'm particularly bringing that I can even continue to refine. And so that number, if you wanted to call in and just say your name and say you're leaving a message about Expanding Mind, it's a new thing PRN's trying, so we'll check it out. It's 862-800-6805. That's 862-800-6805, and we can throw them into the mix. But I don't want to talk any more for now, because I want to get to the second part of the interview with Diana Pasulka, author of American Cosmic, UFOs, Religion, and Technology. We had a wonderful chat last week. Got good numbers, as they say. I really hate the numbers thing, though. Well, we'll talk about. I'll rant about that later. Maybe I'll even devote a whole show to a solo rant about weaponized envy and the new social. Anyway, much more fun to continue to talk to Diana, who has a wonderful perspective that I find very simpatico, because her training is pretty similar to mine in terms of scholarship, and we've been influenced, as we talked about last week, by some similar characters, including Jeffrey Kripal and Jacques Vallée, who I've been trying to lure on this show, but believe me, it's very difficult. I've made promises. I've said, don't worry, we can not talk about UFOs. If you're sick of it, we'll just talk about investing or the internet or something. But he's always busy. He's always traveling. But he's a wonderful character, and I know has inspired us both in this sort of middle path where we're open. We actually feel something probably is going on out there that isn't altogether reducible to the familiar laws of physics, at least as they are presented in mainstream science, and yet still remaining radically open and at least I believe very intensely skeptical of in a deep philosophical sense, as opposed to the modern skeptic sense. So today, what I want to focus on is start off, Diana. I want to talk about media, and then I want to talk about religion. So welcome back to the show.
Oh, thanks a lot. I had a great time talking last week with you. It was wonderful.
Yeah, well, one of the we didn't really talk too much about the media angle, and that's one of my what I really like about the book is the way that it's a kind of triangulation of UFOs and from a religious perspective, but also from a media perspective. And you have a lot of very interesting things to say. I mean, one of them is that much of contemporary ufology is a creature of media. It's highly mediated. It's invented through the internet, through documentaries, through Hollywood films, through television shows, and indeed so much so that it's almost hard to distinguish between people that as you insist on, to just make the distinction between the kind of media myth and the experiences or the researchers who are most rigorously interested in the phenomenon and not just participating in recycling and rehashing the mythology. So maybe that's an interesting place to start. I'm thinking in particular you have a chapter about in the field where they're sort of, trying to keep their finger in the dike and preventing the storm of hoaxing and fake news and just more, kind of mediated BS about UFOs and trying to winnow it down. So talk a little bit about this this distinction between the kind of general myth of UFOs and the kind of thing you're most interested in focusing in your book.
Sure. I think actually today is the 9th of January, and today is a really good day to talk about this because we've got Project Blue Book, right, which is a media presentation about Project Blue Book, which was a program that Alan Hynek was a part of, and it's being featured as a media production at the same time that Kit Green and Gary Nolan, two researchers who do work on anomalous cognition, have released a very interesting paper about brains and how brains perceive anomalous cognition. And so what I think is really interesting is that from my perception, the UFO community is really stuck on this media production that plays, people, there's a good book out there about Hynek, the Close Encounters guy, and it's a historical, accurate portrayal of him. That Jacques Vallée worked with Hynek, and you and I know a bit about him too. And you've got this media production that kind of, it takes poetic license, but then you actually have actual research that's out there and everybody seems to be ignoring it. So that's my point. My point was basically that you do have people who are in the field. And by the way, In the Field is a Facebook group started by Scott Brown, And it's a group of global videographers who capture the phenomena. And they also are schooled in CGI and Photoshop. So they're also able to identify hoaxes and things like that. And they basically say it's really difficult to identify what's really anomalous as opposed to what's CGI. And you have to have a trained eye. Okay. So you get this mixing of fact and fiction. And what's really aggravating, I think, for at least it's aggravating for me, is that there are people who are doing this work. And maybe, okay, let's put it this way. You've got people doing the work and they're not on TV. They're not known. They're not in film. And they basically like it that way because they say, well, you know what? If a lot of people were, trying to get the information from me, I wouldn't be able to do my work in peace. So there is work that's being done, but it's not produced. So a lot of people that want to know about it, normal people, go online, they watch TV, and this is where we get our ideas of the phenomenon. But those ideas are completely, I always say this to my undergraduate. This segues actually into this idea of religion. I always say to my undergraduates, most of what you know about religion comes from film, TV, and the internet. Have you ever read what's in the Bible? And a lot of them say, yes, yes, yes. And then I pick up the Bible and I say, okay, let's take a look at these two creation stories. And they go, whoa, 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 two creation stories? And I say, yeah, they're side by side here in the Bible. You've not read it. So, what they know, they get from, from the screen culture.
Yeah. But it seems like
today's a good day for that because it's happening right in front of us.
With these two kind of projects. Yeah, it seems like, one of the reasons that it seems so important to study ufology, even if you're not interested in going into the real details and, absorbing all the lore, but staying in touch with it, is that it seems to me to be one of the most interesting places to investigate the problems of information and media and reality creation. Even if you're really skeptical about it, it's still really valuable because in addition to just the fact that, of course, there's this whole kind of myth-making machine, both from individuals and amateurs who are promoting themselves or who are kooky or who want to, manipulate ideas. But then you also have two factors, or there are at least two factors. One is that there's, evidence, and you talk about it in your book. It's totally obvious, and as soon as you think about it, it makes total sense that the military has been manipulating UFO mythology for more than one agenda since, the early 50s, if not into the 40s with the Roswell events and the first arising of the flying saucer, in the sense that not only does this mythology make a good cover for actual developments, so people see weird things in the sky and they go, oh, it's just another UFO story. So it's a way of creating a screen around actual military developments. But in a more spooky zone, if you can imagine an espionage counterintelligence agency or set of agencies who are interested in exploring how one creates mass mythology, you're going to see it here. You're not going to see it. That this is where you're going to see those kinds of manipulations as well. So there's very good reason to believe that the myth sphere isn't just a product of Hollywood or isn't just a product of amateurs who are, indulging in their own myth-making imagination in ways that can be very entertaining and quite rich, but that there's more going on there. So that's one side that seems interesting. And then the other thing that I'll throw out there, and you can take what you want, the other thing is that as far as I read it, and I could be wrong, as far as I read it, it seems to be the case that if you look really closely at a lot of experiences, especially well-known ones, it seems as if there's this strange, almost kind of anticipatory mechanism where scripts, ideas, images, little scenes, scenarios that we can find in fiction, we can find in Pulp Fiction and some strange story from France in the 1930s or whatever, seems to weirdly arise within people's experiences, not in the sense that they just read that stuff and then happen to have the experience, but almost as something weirder is going on, is that the very interface that our imaginations create between us and whatever is stimulating these experiences, when they're not just totally fabricated, that imagination has something to do with our own stories. And Kripal talks about this in lots of ways. So it's not just like the whole problem of myth is in a way the whole problem of the UFO.
I totally agree. I think that like I say in my book, it's the perfect example here of seeing how a myth is created. We have the golden opportunity to see how a legend is formed, but a religion as well. So if I know Christianity best. This is, what I specialize in. So I go back into the first, second, third centuries, and you can see the exact same processes at work. And this is interesting. So, you have experiences, then you have people talking about the experiences, and then you have people coming along and saying, well, these are very powerful experiences. How can we use them? And so, you have all of these different characters, and they all showed up when I first began my research. And I thought, at first I was a little taken off guard. I was like, wait a minute, we've got screenwriters showing up. We, people that are well-known people, people that are interested in doing this, that are household names were showing up, and people, agents, things like that, and that was scary for me. And I thought, what the heck is going on? And then I realized, wait a minute, this is just like Christianity. This is like the beginning of this major movement that's taking place. And you've got the people who are the experiencers. You've got the people who want to make the story of the experiences because they're powerful experiences. You have people that want to spin them for money and entertainment. I mean, you've got every factor in there that goes into making a mythology. And plus it's supercharged because of the type of media we have today, which, by the way, this is another point I make in the book, is that it's Heidegger's point. It's Martin Heidegger, the philosopher's point. It's basically, we assume that our technology is something that we use, but actually we live within a sea of technology. And when we watch something, say we watch, there's a great book called Your Mind on Film, and it's by Jeffrey Zach, I believe his name is Jeffrey Zach.
Yeah, Zach.
And he's a neuroscientist. And he does a great job, because what he does is he shows that, okay, you take, say, a historical event, and you let people read or the historical event, and then a week later you show them a very visually stimulating movie about this event that's wrong, that's incorrect, and it's not historically accurate. And then 2 weeks later you test them on it, and they're going to remember the visual. They're going to remember the stimulating, immersive environment. They won't remember the accurate portrayal of it. So, so even though we go to the movie or we watch something on the internet and we say, I don't believe this, I know it's not true, our brains are way trickier than that. So we physiologically respond to it as if it's true. So we go into, say, The Conjuring. I worked on that movie. We go into The Conjuring, and we say to each other, oh, we know this is stupid. It's not true. Not that it's stupid. It's really good. James Wan is an excellent director. We go in there, we go, it's not true. But then why are we screaming, So if I tell you, you're eating a lemon, okay, and you can't stop from making that weird kind of you're going to salivate, because you're not eating a lemon, but your brain is doing something different. Your body is doing something different. So what I'm saying in my book is that with all this research in cognitive science and neuroscience, it's changing the way we think. It's changing what we think. So when we see something in the sky, we're going to, no one wants to be that person who sees a UFO, right? I mean, none of my friends do. They're like, oh yeah, whatever. It's a drone or something, or it's, but, so we think of all the things it couldn't be. But in our minds, we're always like, oh, the first thing we think of is UFO. Well, about 100 years ago, maybe the first thing they think of was an angel, or that's the Virgin Mary coming down on a circular cloud or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, there's these issues are so sticky, and you really have an interesting way of approaching it in your book in terms of talking about how these new media objects, and particularly given the degree which we're immersed in them, they're more sort of surrounding us. The internet itself it increasingly takes on this kind of quality of a kind of immersive media space, not in the sense of virtual reality, and that's just around the corner. I mean, just wait how that's going to go. That we are seeing some kind of weird shift in the reality fantasy kind of tension, and which is in some sense always been part of human experience. I mean, that's what older religions or mythologies are. You read Thucydides, and it's a kind of historical battle. Everything's kind of normal. We can relate to it, and then the god Hermes shows up and runs across the battlefield and proclaims something, and then people have to build the temple, and you're like, well, what is that? Is that just some interpolation of the writer after the fact, where everything else was kind of what we would conceive as normal, or is there some sort of kind of weird edge where the fiction reality blend kind of gets kicked into gear and begins to sort of alter at least human experience? And we can talk about that from the perspective of myth. We can talk about it from the perspective of religion. But one thing I wanted to ask you about, and how you felt about it, and it's almost kind of an ethical question, is when you factor in the science. Because one of the things that makes the UFO scene a little different in terms of it being a new religion is the way in which it, in many different domains or dimensions, invokes science and technology, whether it's the specific obsession with nuts and bolts machines, or what kinds of technological principles could explain these craft, or whether, as some of your subjects, including these technically and scientifically sophisticated people who kind of lean into the fringier potentials and possibilities of science and physics in order to kind of explain how, or to kind of sneak up on explanations for how these things can go. There's an element of science in here too. And the question I wanted to ask you, I know it's a long roundabout way, but hopefully it's interesting. The question I wanted to ask you is, it comes out of a feeling that I had, a very strong sense that I had when I was reading it, and I'm not sure whether it makes sense or not. So that's why I'm asking you. So when I read, and you're talking about some of your characters and they're, having, religious experiences or mythological experiences, or they're wrestling with the kind of deeper meanings of these things, I'm like, great. Let's just look at new forms of religion. Let's look at new ways that people are organizing the meaning of the world, using symbols, using beliefs. Great. Let's just check it out. It's like the open-ended religious anthropologist. Let's just put it out there. No need to judge them. Let's just see what kind of meanings people are making, let's say, of visions of Mary, and how that feeds into a devotional Catholic culture. Great. I don't need to deflate those balloons. I'm just interested in how the phenomena works. But when I come to reading some of the sections of your scientific subjects, and they start invoking, let's just say, not altogether normal physics to explain certain things, there's something else that I respond where I go, I kind of want you to say, to make it clear that this is New Age physics, meaning it's not quite what standard physicists would say, and without getting involved in the whole question of what science is, blah blah blah. And I'm realizing that's kind of the point, is that part of what makes the UFO religion powerful is that there's an aspect of it that's not just quote unquote religious. There's an aspect of it that has to do with technology, with science, with physics. And that's part of the claim, and that's part of what makes your scientific subjects so interesting in this book. But I still don't know how to think about it. Do I just say, oh yeah, well, they're coming up with these ideas and da-da-da, where there's another part of me that wants to go, it's really important, especially as intellectuals, even if we're sympathetic with people, to continue to insist on some kind of reality that is not just like giving into the story, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And that is where so I'll respond in two different ways. The first way is that what makes this a new type? So this is not your standard UFO religion, right? So this is not like, Nation of Islam, UFO religion type thing, because we have those. This is a new type of religiosity. And what gives it a diffuse and widespread appeal is its potential truth claims. And the potential truth claims are future oriented. So this is how it goes. So we say, well, the universe is, billions of years old. And surely there has been or will be life, right? And maybe we'll find it, maybe we won't find it. Maybe it's found us, maybe it hasn't. NASA scientists, Ellen Stofan is the chief NASA scientist. She comes on every month and she makes a statement and says, we will find life. She's not talking about like intelligent life or grays or anything like that. She's talking about microbes or something like that, but that's not how people read it. So she's saying we're going to find life. So you've got not only the mythology of the advanced ET, right, coming to either save us or destroy us, right? Either they're evil or they're good. But you also have scientists basically supporting this realistic idea that this could potentially happen. You don't really have that in other religions. So if you look at Christianity, you have to have faith to believe that Jesus walked on water. You have to have faith that he was resurrected and is the Son of God. Okay. No scientist is going to say, I'm going to prove that he's the Son of God. I'm going to prove that a man can walk on water. But you actually here do have scientists, and that's why I feature them. You have these scientists who are basically saying, in one particular case, I'm getting ET downloads, and they're helping me create technology. And another who's saying, at some point, ET, we're going to find some kind of habitable planet or life, or we're going to go into space, and this is how we're going to do it. And so, they're kind of at the forefront of, they're both incredibly successful. We can't, I'm not going to deny that. So what you have is you have the potential. It's like this. Okay. If you give a survey, I give surveys to my students and I say, who believes in I give them 4 or 5 different ways that they could believe in ET life, right? And one of the ways is its future. I believe that it could possibly happen. And a lot of them go for that one. So I make that statement in my book. I say, it's okay. People are very comfortable saying, well, perhaps someday this will happen, right? So they defer the realism of it. And so that's very powerful for a new belief form, a new mythology. So we're talking about a mythology that has a potential truth claim here, which is weird.
Yeah, and it's weird in a specific way in that it messes with time. It messes with time and also the sense of like cultural evolution, like we're moving towards some kind of event. And you see that also in the way that, and you don't really talk about this too much in your book, but one of the more significant things you'll find if you kind of dive into sort of standard issue ufology is that there'll be these waves of rumors and expectation and hope around like the revelation, where the government comes out and says, okay, you're right. The disclosure, that, and it's such a it's meaning that, even though we have seen disclosures, there was the New York Times piece, a couple of years ago. It was like, what's that? That's so weird. And it felt weird to see it on the front page of the Times, like that itself was kind of a weird virtual reality experience. Not unlike I remember the first day I went in and discovered that, Arnold Schwarzenegger was running for governor. Like, it did that to me. Like, I felt like I was in a science fiction movie. Anyway, so but Disclosure, it's so clearly about this sort of almost it's like a kind of, it's a literal revelation. It's that the truths will be known and they will destroy existing reality and everything will be kind of different. And so on the one hand, you can look at it and go, oh, that's so obviously religious. Come on. I mean, we can just see it. It's almost clockwork, religious psychology, Christian psychology. And yet at the same time, there, like you say, there's this kind of, it's all about a certain kind of truth claim that is not reducible or not, you can't just write it off directly as another mythological form. So is it still, does it then hurt it a little bit to think about it as religion? Is religion a big enough category to take in these future sciences? In a way, like your scientist characters are talking about future technology development.
Yeah,
so I'm
that's really a good question. Yeah.
Do we miss something by talking?
I think that I've been working in new religious movements, and a lot of people are doing fiction-based religion. Okay, so to me, this is even a different category than that. This is a category that makes this mythology so powerful that there's no way so many people are going to believe it. I feel like there's nothing we can do. We're going in that direction. It's going to happen. I'm not saying that ETs are going to come like Independence Day or anything like that. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that this truth bite to this new mythology makes it irresistible. That's what I'm saying. And that's basically what I'm saying all through the book, is that this is how this new type of religion emerges from our digital screen culture. This is how it does. And this is that new type of religion. And we're going to see it everywhere in different types of forms.
Yeah. I mean, in one,
and so, yeah,
go ahead.
That's basically what I'm saying.
Well, I was thinking about, again, this weird sense that there's like a future object that's shaping the UFO discourse, like that there's a sense of whether it's disclosure or whether it's the encounter or whether it's even just mainstream scientists saying, yeah, we found a bug on an asteroid or something, that there's this sense of
future. Yeah, it's eschatology.
Right.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking that maybe there's another element of it, and your book would very much support that, particularly your wonderful discussion of 2001, that another object that's sort of looming in the future, that in a way that ufology is kind of like the temporal backwash of it through, reverse through time, is that point where, because of virtual reality, because of children being raised in this environment and it becoming more and more difficult and fewer people are capable of maintaining a kind of full-on critical distance that makes a distinction between history and fantasy and maybe there's also a sense that there's that moment of like perfect virtual reality when the reality game is up and all the distinctions break down. And it's also a fantasy like Disclosure or like, the ET's landing at the end of Close Encounters. But I think it's also something that's implied by looking at this phenomenon deeply, like the way you do, which is it seems to reflect the power of that breakdown between fiction and fact. Let's call it virtuality, where it's sort of both and neither. That once it becomes a sort of force, like or it becomes a new force, that it's precisely going to take this kind of form of this encounter with an alien object, with a cosmic intelligence, with some kind of galactic mind, with some kind of future technology. That very future technology, it's just like what you talk about with the monolith in 2001.
Yeah, isn't that crazy? Yeah, that movie was just haunted me throughout the writing of that book. I couldn't get away from it.
I never even got that thing. Like I'm right here. I'm picking up my cell phone and I go, oh, it's a monolith. Like I never got that. Like it's like right in front of my face every day. I mean, I've seen that movie a dozen times, and then now I'm like, oh my God, look, there's I carry a monolith around with me everywhere I go. And the weird way that the monolith is a screen, Isn't
that bizarre? Yeah. That was, I have to give credit to the guy who did collative learning, I think it's called. And he's got a bunch of I recommend everybody watch his analyses of 2001 and the monolith, the meaning of the monolith. And his last name is Ayer, but I can't remember his first name, but it's collative learning. And early on, I read his analysis and I was like, of course that's it. Of course that's it. So it's the cinema screen, and it's the screen. It's, it's the screen cultures that we live within. There was another point I was going to raise that you were talking about, but I can't remember what it was. It was right before the 2001.
We're talking about the breakdown of real and virtual as this kind of backwards effect.
Kind of like this. Yeah. The singularity type thing. So, right. So, this conflation of, what the kind of reality in which we live. Did we talk in part 1 about the specialist factual genre?
We mentioned it, but why don't you? I had that noted as something that I'd like to hear more about, because I'd never heard of it really before. I mean, I was aware of it a little bit, but it's a big deal.
It really is, because this is exactly what is happening right now. So it's a genre called specialist factual, and it's kind of like documentary, or there are different genres of TV and Netflix, and every production company now, not everyone, but it's the big deal right now to have a specialist factual department. And specialist factual is a weird name, and I don't know who invented it. However, there's a Philip K. Dick short story that was made into Total Recall, and it was called "We Can Remember It For You Wholesale." And the name of that corporation that places false memories into your brain is called, in P.K. Dick's short story, it's called extra factual. So specialist factual is the exact same thing. What it is it's a department in these production companies that do this. They splice CGI and different types of use, of special effects that look realistic into historical footage, and they pitch them as documentaries, and they pitch them to kids. And so you'll see specialist factual productions on like BBC documentaries or the History Channel, and you'll see like the shark megalodon, or you'll see Tyrannosaurus Rex autopsies or something like that. There's a particularly good production company that does, it's called Impossible Factual. And what's interesting is that there are these professional firms that do this, but there are also people that have websites that do this as well. Like If Star Wars Was Real, I think you were at one of the conferences where I showed If Star Wars Was Real. It's a great website by this person who splices Star Wars characters into iconic pictures of world history. And so, it's like, here we live within this virtual environment, which is now our environment. We can't deny it. And we live with these characters who aren't actually real, yet to us, they have lives. They're real. People cry when they die, so this new virtual reality is being accelerated through these kinds of production companies like Specialist Factual.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, it's just another, one thing to say. Earlier, you were talking about in the field, and there's a really poignant comment that the fellow makes. And as you point out, one of the main things these guys do is that they fight against hoaxes. Like they're interested in real deal records of whatever weird objects are in the sky, not in people hoaxing. And he basically says it's a losing battle, and it's a losing battle
Yes.
now. But it's really going to be a
Yeah.
losing battle in like 2 years, and just like 2 years, like not like 20 years, like 2 years.
No, right.
And,
Yeah. 2 years. It might even be lost.
it might already, well, in some sense it's already lost because that's going to happen. And in a way, what I was just thinking about is that what you're talking about with the specialist factual programming and then the kind of, putting Star Wars characters in historical footage is that it's this sort of sense that we're already in this. We've already crossed this point where we really can't trust video anymore as a carrier of historical value. And it's a weird thing because you think about it, like people had history or something like history before there was cinema, before there was photography. It wasn't like there wasn't history in 1753. There was. It's just that what carried history for those people was different than what carries it for 20th century people, which has a huge amount to do with cinema and photography and audio recording. And we're sort of riding it. We're at the very tail end of that as a coherent way of holding on to history. So it's not like history disappears and it's all just fantasy, but it is like those forces that have sustained our sense of history and have modulated it and been used as factual evidence in courtrooms, in historical memory, in training, in telling people about their history for all of the distortions. Nonetheless, there's something to having seen those scratchy black and white films of the Holocaust or whatever. But that stuff is going away. And the weird looping, vertiginous void that opens up is we only have a taste of it now in the fact that the History Channel runs Ancient Aliens shows and shows that aren't really rooted in anything like conventional history, but they're called the History Channel. And the same thing with National Geographic and these other sort of bodies that at least at one point stood for some kind of journalistic or historical value. Those are already melted down, but that's just a little bonbon, a little aperitif for the gargantuan feast of confusion that's just around the corner.
Yeah, I agree. It's incredible.
So how do you think the UFO is, what's going to happen? I mean, do you sense that this is actually going to become even more pervasive?
Oh, no doubt. It's definitely going to become more pervasive. This is a good example. So my students, they're 20, right? So they're college students, and the Vatican.
Hey, Diana.
I had taught a class.
Hey, Diana.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah, just that last bit. Just start talking about the students again.
Okay.
No.
Okay. So I have these students, and the college students. Let's see. Let's see. Can you hear me now?
I can't hear you now.
You can?
Yeah.
Okay.
So just start again.
So, all right. Should I start?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So a really good example is so I have students, they're college students, 20 years old. So the students go, they see St. Francis of Assisi, and he's being given the stigmata by an angel in the sky. And to them, this angel looks like a UFO, and it looks like this UFO is zapping him and giving him these wounds. And so they write back to me, they send me pictures, and they say, hey, is this guy getting, zapped by a UFO? So because of the media priming of, all of the UFO media that we've been exposed to since birth, we won't see things the same as we did before. And that's just the reality. That's just how it is.
But now that's in a way the same thing, and then as sort of whatever intellectuals or historians or critical thinkers, we push back against that, just the way that even though that may be different, the same way that you might push back against the some popular idea of ghosts or something in the 18th century, at least if that's something we're still invested in. And I guess what I'm trying to think about is what is how do you try to like engage that reality, recognize that it's going to be true for people, and yet not simply submit to the kind of self-mythologizing, in some ways, mind manipulating logic of contemporary media.
Right. So that's a good question, and I wish I could answer that. I mean, that's my question. And so I even asked that question in the beginning. I say, I'm just about to, as a religious studies person who's trained to keep my distance and stuff like that, how am I possibly going to write this book without being somehow folded into this mythology myself? And truthfully, I don't know if I can. So I'm just going to write the book. And that's what I did.
Yeah, no, I can relate with that. I mean, I had something similar when I wrote High Weirdness. There's a way in which I was trying to articulate at the end, and it kind of feels like my core questions are things that have to do with, experiences I've had, nebulous things that I can't put anywhere, and that ultimately all the book is doing is kind of passing it on. It's like passing on the conundrum. It's like you're not, because it doesn't work to just say, oh, we need to restore the sense of historical reality and like, good luck, fella. That's not really the waters, at least that people like you and I swim in, which does bring us, we haven't talked too much about religion per se, but, one of the many surprising things in your book was this, at the very end, we see one of your science characters, Tyler, goes with you to Italy, and he either because he's already in on the secret, or because he's a famous guy. It's not really clear. Through him, you get all this access to the Vatican Library that you normally wouldn't get. And then he ends up having a kind of, he ends up having a conversion experience, and we watch him kind of convert or open up to this new sense of religiosity and of compassion, and within a Catholic frame. And I mean, that's a very interesting thing. And so what it made me go, how do you compare and contrast at that point between the UFO search, which has this kind of scientific or technical dimension to it, and in a way, a kind of classic religious search that winds up with a change of heart, with a maybe even an embrace of ideas that must be taken on faith. Does Tyler kind of prove that we're still really in religion here, or how did you end up thinking about that?
Well, first of all, it really surprised me. So it's not like I planned this to happen, but it did. And so it was one of the things in the book. I mean, here I am studying, going around doing research on UFOs, and that's weird. But then this happens, and truthfully, that, so this guy becomes, he's completely impacted by this ethos in Rome, and then at the Vatican Observatory, talking with Brother Guy Consolmagno, who's this, Jesuit brother astronomer. And it's powerful. I watch it, and I want to find out if it has changed his idea of the phenomena. And he basically contextualizes it as he believes in God, but he also believes in ETs, right? And he believes that ETs are below God, but above humans. So he's got kind of this hierarchical way of looking at things, kind of like a medieval hierarchy. And so to me, that was fascinating. And I also saw what, because he was meeting people that had dedicated their lives to serving people. And I think that, here he's in the United States, he's got it, he's got his own airplane, and, he's kind of one of these guys that's made it. And so he doesn't actually work. I mean, all of my life, I went to a Jesuit school, and I've been Catholic. I've been around people who are Catholic. And so I that's nothing new to me. So I've seen people who've dedicated their lives. A lot of my friends are sisters and priests, and they do the hard work. They really do. They do a lot of hard work. And so here he's exposed to that, and that somehow touches him and opens him. And it's something I didn't expect at all. But I had to report it because that's what happened. And it became my last chapter. Even though I thought I was done with my book, I realized that, this is too weird. I have to put this chapter in here. And so does it say anything? I actually end with the conclusion back to Heidegger, and it's not necessarily, it's kind of a gloomy ending, I think, for me. Maybe not for Tyler, because he has a different ending than the ending I have. But, I put it back onto us and our relationship with technology. And Heidegger basically ends by saying, he's pretty doomsday about it.
Yeah. Only a God can save us now. Although I was thinking of one other line that you talk about it in the book too, which is this interesting idea about the absurd. That Vallée was one of the first people to really point out. It's like, no, the absurdity is part of the phenomenon. It's not that the absurdity shows you that it's just goofy and people making it up, nor that people are misperceiving and that's the problem. It's that absurdity is almost woven into not just the UFO, but a great deal of paranormal activity. There's this element of the kind of trickster absurd. But then that loops around again to one of those, the kind of classic line. I don't remember whether it's Tertullian or whoever says it, but that one believes because it is absurd. And there's some sense of the necessity of the absurd as a way of understanding reality, as a way of understanding things like these strange phenomena are, as a way of understanding why people continue to be religious, but also understanding how we can possibly have hope in relationship to all these things that we're talking about. Like, it's almost absurd to go, hey, let's just keep rolling, guys. We'll make it through. Well, we won't completely submit to the crazy. So there's some kind of sense of like the absurd as being a really important factor in this whole thing.
That's right. And and Jacques says that to me, definitely. And I actually quote that, and I think it is the conclusion. And that to me, more than any, and thanks for bringing it up, more than any other aspect, I think that's probably the takeaway for me, just for me, because Jacques has said it's a koan, the Japanese Zen koan, right? Buddhist koan. It basically boggles the mind and wakes us up. And maybe that's what it's about. I don't know. But you know what? If it's about that, that's good.
Yeah, we can't really know the end of that one. I was just listening to a podcast with Thomas Metzinger, who's a neuroscientist and Buddhist practitioner, very rational guy, but also very deep practitioner. And he was talking about there's a kind of state you can get into, which is sort of not that this is just an illusion, but it's also not what it seems to be. Like if you recognize that our perception of the world is a model that's created by the brain and you base it on anticipation and history and things like that, it's not that the model isn't there or it doesn't correspond or in some way represent a more underlying reality, but it's also a fabrication. And he was talking about the meditation or even going in and out of virtual reality, and he's kind of interested in the relationship between them, can get us to this place where what's happening, phenomena, appearances, in a sense, are neither real or simply illusion. And that thing, which is scary but also seems to be very key to our experience, does seem to be another thing at play in all of this, or at least a way to give it a kind of Zen or a kind of metaphysical framework rather than just talking about like, oh, we can't tell the difference between reality and fantasy anymore. There's something else that's being pointed out.
I love that. I think it's great.
Well, what kind of we just got a couple of minutes left. What kind of response have you gotten from from true believers? Have people accused you of working for the CIA yet?
Yeah, that happened a long time ago. So, yeah, I've gotten a lot of positive response from people who are religious, and I've also, believe it or not, gotten some cool responses from affiliated people.
From what? To say that again? From what?
With the CIA.
Oh, okay.
And yeah, affiliated people. I mean, positive responses all around. Let's put it that way. I got positive responses from the mainstream press. Publishers Weekly gave me a starred review. Kirkus reviewed it, said that UFO people who believed in UFOs were not delusional. I was like, okay, I'll take it. So my press has delayed, it seems, releasing it for various reasons, and that has gotten some people riled up, and I wish I could release it, but that's, the press gave me an apology for it, but there's nothing I can do about it. It releases on January 18th from the press.
All right.
So, it's been wonderful working with my editor, Cynthia. She's the best. She's quite intuitive, introduced me to a lot of the Russian cosmos stuff. And so far things have been okay. I think that, there will be pushback from various people, but I'll ask my friends to help me not read those reviews.
Absolutely. No.
Or I'll drink a glass of wine before I read them.
No. I think it'll be a good ride, and maybe all the anticipation will amplify the excitement once the people can actually get their hands on the book. So anyway, we can just wrap it up there. But I just wanted to thanks again for speaking with us here on Expanding Mind.
It's fun. Thanks so much, Eric, and I'll talk to you soon.
Great. That's Diana Pasulka again, author of American Cosmic, UFOs, Religion, Technology. It was supposed to be out, but now I'm going to hold on to my galley copy, even more valuably, but it will be out very shortly. So tune into that and tune into the show next week. I think I'm going to do a solo show next week. I did one earlier last year, and people liked it, so I'm going to give it another shot. And until then, keep your minds open.